Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical reread podcast, a 17 shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Today, we will be talking about the Way of Kings and its implications for the wider Cosmere. Joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm Windrunner.
David.
I am Windrunner.
Joshua.
And I am Jofwu.
And I am firstRainbowRose. This episode will have spoilers for all of the released books up to this point, which to this point, it is The Rhythm of War is the most recent book that has been released.
As of recording.
Mm-hmm. All of you lucky people in the future who have read the fun books.
Oh, we mentioned earlier that this was kind of the first book to really start delving into the wider Cosmere. And a significant portion of that is the part 2 epigraphs, I believe, which form a letter, which at no point is explained in the book. Kind of have to figure it out or have it explained to you. But it is a letter from Hoid, the king's wit himself, to a dragon, because dragons exist in the Cosmere. To Frost, a dragon, which is why there's the reference to "you old reptile," which
I hated that. I was so convinced it was not to a dragon back when we were fighting. I was like, "There's no way. It's just an insult." But it is pretty cool.
There's a lot of little tidbits that we now know refer to other things, such as the element that Hoid is keeping safe, which is actually the bead of Lerosium that he acquired in Well of Ascension. Or we didn't actually see it. We saw it in Secret History, but it was next to the Well of Ascension.
Mm-hmm.
We get Ati was once a kind and generous man. Ati, Atium, the vessel of ruin. So it's like, yeah, bad stuff happened there, but we also get race, the name race, where like we get odium is referred in the book a handful of times. It's like, they're the same person.
All the Cell stuff, the references to Cell and Aeona and Sky, that's like information we did not receive in Elantris. That was stuff like we had some ideas from Wobs, but we didn't really, we didn't know their intents for the longest time. We were just talking about Aeona and Sky's shard. But that was a pretty cool. It's kind of I wouldn't call it a baller move, but maybe to just like throw out all these crazy things in this book and be like, okay, well, my readers, 95% of my readers will never, or at least will not in the next like 2 or 3 years understand at all what is happening in this book. Whereas in this, or in other series, I should say, the epigraphs are like much more directly relevant to the plot.
I mean, this is the first time that we get to see our late namesake, the 17 shard reference is in that letter, and
the first and the last.
Yeah.
Is it? Has it?
I think so.
Has it been mentioned any other time?
Was it in Secret History?
So.
Did it get a mention?
I don't think they definitely weren't in Secret History. That's hilarious.
It's the only time.
Oh my gosh.
Like we have a couple wobs about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never conceptualized that. That's so funny.
That's awesome.
But it is very interesting because like this happens right after the Ishik interlude where we see the 17 shard members, Demo, Galadon, and Bayonne just doing their thing, trying to find Hoid in the complete wrong place.
And they're on the right planet, at least.
Yeah.
Could be worse.
True. They've narrowed it down.
We also got Bovidin's name from this, which was another shard that we only knew them as Bovidin's shard for a very long time.
And for a very long time, I remember it took a while to even like land on us being confident that Hoid was the author of this letter. Like it was a very mysterious, like thing that people spend a lot of time dissecting.
But I think this letter and the decoding the illustrations for like the various fabrial things like went a long way to like instilling in fandom a desire to pick apart these books and find all of the hidden meaning in every little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know I very much enjoy doing. Like that is fun.
Mm-hmm. We come by it honestly. We've also been encouraged to the place we've arrived at as a fandom.
Yes. Yeah. Brandon made a choice to do this. He brought it upon himself.
Oh no, we were picking apart things we've come to recognize that he will let us do it anyway, but I remember discussions from Time Waster's Guide where there was a multi-page thing about Vin's brother's rock that he used to carry around.
Oh, yeah. Reen's obsidian.
Yes. So
and there's random other bits of obsidian sprinkled throughout the Cosmere. I was like, it's sketchy. There's nothing there. I'm fairly confident. We're like, but
you don't think Reen's obsidian came from Shadesmar? You never know. But I think the other thing that it does a good job establishing in the letter is that basically the line where it's like the pillars of the Cosmere will shake like due to the results of our war here. Like it's not just like here's a bunch of cool references to the other planets. It's like this a bunch of stuff's happened elsewhere, but like this is one of the most important. What you're reading now is one of the most important things that you have read so far.
Mm-hmm. There's another. It's in the Dalinar's the first vision, the one he has at the end of the book where he meets with Honor, where he has the vision of the stars in the sky that start winking out. Which is another kind of pretty, I think, important reminder that, or a hint, I guess, that the events that are unfolding on Roshar are very important for the Cosmere at large.
Mm-hmm.
That is still interesting. I still don't even know what I think necessarily that was meant to refer to, even still.
Well, so I guess my interpretation of it is that to me it suggests the greater war of the Cosmere that it gets referred to in Rhythm of War. That
oh yeah, we can talk about that stuff.
Yeah,
I know. I keep trying to talk around things, and I'm like, wait a minute, we're good.
To me, it implies like this, like dangers, just a general like sense of danger to other worlds that Honor believes to be rooted in what's happening on Roshar, presumably Odium. Like he's afraid of Odium, stomping around the rest of the Cosmere and wiping out planet. Maybe that's not true. Maybe that's Honor's bias or his fears that are not going to be realized. But
I definitely agree that it might be metaphorical. I remember way back when we didn't have as good a count of how many shards Odium had killed, there was a suggestion that they were representing shards that had been killed. And I think my big curiosity is whether it's purely metaphorical and Honor is like worlds are at stake here, or if it is like referring to like planets that Odium has devastated in the past or something like that. I'm interested if we'll ever learn more about that, or if Honor was doing a little bit of drama.
Yeah, like there is. Brennan has said that the ends of the Stormlight Archive are seated in like the first few books, and so it's always interesting. Like, okay, but where? It's like, does that tie into things at all? Like these stars winking out? Maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to talk about Hoid, because up until this point in publication history, Hoid's just been having cameo appearances. Like there's implications he's been doing stuff, but it's all been off screen. But this is a story he's decided to get very involved with. And in some instances, characters he's decided to get very, very involved with.
Aiden Alcium. What? Nothing.
Well, at least it wasn't Aiden Acium. And I think Wit is another one, less so in this book, but as the books go on, that he basically screams at the reader like something crazy is going on here. And if you're just reading this series, like you're not getting all the pieces, which is totally fine if Stormlight's the one that's to your taste. But there's more if you want to dig at it.
Definitely. He very consistently hints at more. there being more. Like his whole, like the wander sale scene, like he is super sketchy during that scene with Kaladin. Like he's like constantly like, oh, like don't want you to steal my Stormlight. And he like gives the explanation like, oh yeah, bridgemen are thieves, they'll take my spheres. That's not at all what he meant. He's just toying with poor Kaladin.
It is very satisfying.
I went into this book knowing that Hoid was Wit because Brendan did a reading of a scene with Wit in it. But for those who were reading it for the first time, it was a huge twist finding out that Hoid was this King's Wit character that you see running around the entire time. You get to the interlude where it's like, Hoid, where are you? And you're like, oh, that's the only thing we're going to get because it's a cameo. And then you get to the scene with Dalinar where it's like, is that your name? It's like, yeah, you can call me Hoid. And it was like, wait, what? And for so many readers, that was such a huge twist because we expected nothing but a cameo. And
And his appearance hadn't been really super well established at that point either. Like he had been in disguise basically every time we'd seen him so far. And so there wasn't a lot to call him out as Hoid beyond just the general strangeness. But like, you know, so many aspects of the Hoid that we all know, I feel like really come into like appeared in this book, you know, like no one knew like how much of a joker he was or like what his personality was really like based upon his appearance as the informant in Mistborn, you know?
Yeah, because he really is a non-character in all of those books. Like he gets a bit more in Warbreaker because he has the whole storytelling scene. But the narrative doesn't linger on him enough to like really dig into that. Whereas here, it's like like you said, like his personality does blossom and develop, and we get to see what it is. And I think that's because Stormlight is one of the backbones of the Cosmere, the pillars, so to speak. That of course he's going to get more involved with the story. Like he's one of like the major players, like in the whole sequence. Brendan is going to want to play with that toy.
It's interesting to me that he hasn't had a more prominent role in Mistborn Era 2 because Mistborn is another backbone of the Cosmere, and Brandon has said that Hoid will be a major character in Mistborn Era 4. So like, there's going to be a point where he comes into those stories. It's interesting that he hasn't pulled him in more as he did kind of at the same time in Stormlight Archive, as he's kind of writing these books. I can't really guess why that is. Like maybe he just doesn't want to like overwhelm us with like, you know, too much Hoid.
Maybe.
I think part of it is, I know that he said before that, at least in the Alloy scene where he appears attending Misha's wedding, that he is legitimately just come to the planet to attend the event, and at that time he kind of clocks that something is going on there and starts appearing a little more. But I definitely think it's in part just because Era 2 was not in the original plan, and I also kind of have to wonder if Brandon was like not 100% locked down on the timeline, and he was like, okay, how much can I use him here versus maybe he's supposed to be somewhere else at this time a ton, so he can't really like be here, but he does show up still, like, you know, he's still there every now and again.
I do think it's probably something along the lines of Hoid's main story right now is in Stormlight, so he doesn't want to split that attention. Like he can still make cameo appearances, but like he's not going to have a like character arc in Mistborn, because it's like it would be confusing, like having them the same character at two different points having two different character arcs.
Potentially, although do you feel Hoid has had a character arc in Stormlight?
Ish.
Okay, yeah, because I just don't I don't think he's changed or grown much. Like, I enjoy him, but he's just doing his thing in my book.
I mean, like, it's a character arc. It's not an internal character arc. It's an external one.
Okay.
He has formed this bond. Like, he's forming, like, attachments with people. And he's trying to get stuff done. And also, like, I can't really use Hoid too much. Well, I guess the timeline is still up in the air, but like can't use too much of Hoid on schedule right now because there's a whole question of like design. Like, how do you get design off world?
That's true.
I've never seen that as too much of a problem. I just imagine that like Hoid can like, I don't know, he just like seems to know everything else. It's if Hoid wants to be off world with design, I just like assume that he can be.
I definitely believe he has, if he can't just do it, he has the resources to figure it out and the intelligence to figure it out.
Oh yeah, he's definitely capable, but that might be revealing things before Brandon wants them revealed.
Sure. Could be.
He doesn't want Hoid just to reveal everything. Like he wants like the Rosharans to figure that out. And then like it will allow Hoid can do whatever he wants, which he always could have done. But from a viewer perspective.
One thing that I noticed this time with Hoid, it's probably not super significant, but anytime Hoid is like, since he's got his like intuition that he needs to go some places sometimes, and however that's supposed to work, you know, I assume that that's how he ended up where he needed to be for Talm in the end of the book. On the Chasm, the Chasm Fiend hunt, he shows up early, and then Elhokar doesn't see him until the end, and he's like, "Well, where have you been?" And he's like, "Oh, I just had some things to be about." And I'm like, "What are you doing in Dalinar's camp? You know, like did you get an intuition that you needed to go to the bar, or are you like, is something going on here?" So anytime he just drops off the radar, I'm always like, where are you going? What are you doing, Hoid?
He's an interesting one. I could see it going both ways, where like there might be like something important going on there, or he might just be being cryptic because that's fun.
Yeah. He is not above trolling Elhokar of all people, you know.
We can talk about like the other letters. I think like when we get to the subsequent books in this series, but this letter that Hoid has written, so he's writing a letter to Frost. Where do you think he wrote this letter relative to the timeline of the books?
That's an excellent question.
Related maybe-ish question. When do you think Hoid showed up on? How long has he been on Roshar prior to the events of the books? I imagine that he's been like Elhokar's wit for like I think like I don't know, not terribly long, like
some months is what they say. Jasna has met him, so he's been around long enough that last time Jasna was a
we do get the Hoid appearance in Shallan's flashbacks.
That's true, which is like 6-ish years ago. He needs to
less,
like 3 years maybe. Seems like she was like.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
he needs enough time to take Sigil as his apprentice. I kind of assume that when Rock saw him climb out of the pool, that was him coming to Rashard this time. And there's not really, I don't believe there's any timestamps associated with when Rock had that meeting with him. But
how old do we think Rock is? Like 40s?
Yeah, he's probably in his 40s, I'd say.
I mean, he's got kids that are teenagers, right?
Yeah. So like, let's assume like that, like the earliest that could happen was like Rock was a teenager, then 25-ish years max.
I don't think it's been that long.
I think it's a good upper bound, though.
Yeah.
So somewhere
a decade or two, probably.
But he has to lay a false trail to the Pure Lake. Like, he's got stuff to be about. Lif meets him and he gets into a great shell's mouth for a period of time. Like,
so I guess I imagine he showed up a couple, like, I don't know, at least a couple years, maybe a couple decades, and then I imagine he writes these letters like after he spent a little bit of time trying to like get some help. He like sees this issue developing and he's trying to like get some assistance from other shards.
I think that it's interesting. We see him write letters in Rhythm of War, and I assume they're not these letters. Like, that doesn't make sense because he's informing them like, hey, our communication has been compromised. But I feel like that some of those letters probably, like one of those letters probably went to Harmony, you know?
I assume he like wrote several letters similar to this one where he's writing to Frost saying, hey, there's a problem here. I wish you would come help. I assume he sent something similar to basically all the shards.
I could see that.
And so then there's the ones we get in subsequent books that we'll talk about later would be like their responses to those original letters. the same way.
Mhm.
So, anyways.
Yeah, I think that's a good. But I would say probably prior to the events of the books. I feel like what is likely happened is that he's got an idea that the desolations are about to start again, and is looking for allies. And so it's in the run up. But that's an interesting question too, because then you're kind of like, okay, well, how far along is he in this alliance that he's developed with Harmony now? You know,
that's interesting that he was on to like the desolation starting presumably before like Gavilar's assassination, and
I could see that. But the Spren seem to be picking up on something around that time, though. You know,
I believe it's like he has his ability to like know where he needs to be, which I believe Brandon has implied is tied to fortune in some way, sort of.
I think that class of abilities is related to that attribute.
Yeah. That like he might be picking up on it through that mechanism, that like a desolation is coming, that like he is old enough to have been like he was around for previous desolations. Like there might be some sort of metaphysical indicator that he can pick up on that the Spren are picking up on even before Gavilar's assassination.
That's true.
You can also go to Shadesmar and talk to the Spren. But
yeah, I kind of just figured that he has like his normal, I don't know why, but I got to go to Rashard, and he gets there and he's like, that's a big storm building over there, you know, and he's like, okay, something's happening. And I think another thing that I guess we should address if we're talking about Hoid is I love the little moment where he calls Taln his friend, and we see his reverence for the Heralds in future books. And I'm pretty inclined to believe that he really he really does care for Talon, and they really were friends at one point. And I really want to see some more about that.
I don't know if they were friends necessarily, but I do think Hoid genuinely respects the Heralds, or at least the people the Heralds used to be. Hoid is in his own way looking out for the best interests of the Cosmere. And I think he would view the Heralds as people trying to help people. So like that gives them a plus in his book.
That's true.
But also he would have known them.
And like Ash calls him Midius at a later point too, which I think there's a certain level of familiarity there. And there is the correct theory that he was supposed to be the Herald and then Talon swapped with him. And I still really like that idea. So
I don't think I've ever heard that theory.
That's a fun one.
Well, he's got when he talks to Shallan and he like talks about an oath that he once swore about always needing to be there for people, like being there when people need him, which is reminiscent of the whole Stoneward thing. And we know Talon wasn't supposed to be the original Herald. He was the one that wasn't meant to be. So it just wouldn't surprise me.
I think that oath refers to something that far predates.
I don't disagree, but I think it's that attribute. It's he's got that same vibe that Talon has.
Yeah,
interesting.
I'd be interested to ask Brandon, like, because obviously Hoid becomes a Lightweaver. What affinity would he have for various other orders?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. We're talking about Hoid a lot. Do we want to circle to anything else, Cosmere?
There were a couple of foreshadowy-ish sort of things I wanted to touch on that I couldn't before, which is in chapter 5 during the soul casting of the boulder scene. There's the line. And then briefly, Shallan heard a sound, a low thrumming like a distant group of voices humming together a single pure note. Like, does this tie into the pure tones of Roshar in some way?
Presumably.
And like, there's a comment later on that like humming seems to help with soul casting.
I love that.
How do these things tie together?
Oh yeah, I think it's
I imagine that like the thing about humming helping with soul casting is like this like rumor, like this thing that's been distorted and is totally like wrong and has nothing to do with soul casting, but like there's just like somewhere someone got like, in the past, obviously like they knew that like the tones were a thing and were associated with the magic, and then somewhere along the way that got distorted into this rumor that it's involved, that it's related somehow more directly.
I could see that. I think Bentley's affinity for the rhythms, like helping with her stone shaping, leads me to believe that there might be you might be able to like get a little more out of it, or like it might be helpful in some way if you were to be humming the right tone. But I definitely think that that's also a really reasonable explanation.
And then it's an exchange from chapter 62 between Kaladin and Syl, where Syl confronts him like, do you still think you're cursed? And he's like, no, I know I'm not. He looked up at the overcast sky, but that means the failures were all just me. I let Tien die. I failed my spearmen, the slaves I tried to rescue, Tara. If there's no curse or bad luck, no god above being angry at me, I have to live with them knowing that with a little more effort, a little more practice and skill, I could have saved them all. Syl frowned more deeply. Kaladin, you need to get over this. Those things aren't your fault. That's what my father always used to say. Overcome your guilt, Kaladin. Care, but not too much. Blah, 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 blah. And then Syl has like, I don't know any of this, Kaladin, but you're ripping yourself apart inside and out. Like, fourth ideal foreshadowing. This was a problem for him way back when, and eventually gets resolved.
Mm-hmm.
I took note of related. There was a quote. I think this is like chapter like 1 or 2. Chapter 1, I guess. No, it would be 2. Oh, he's talking to Tvlakov when he is being sold, and he says, "I'll never be free of these brands." Tvlakov.
Yeah. I like that too. That's a good one. There were a couple of Shallan moments that I picked up on as well. Like I think right after Yasta like yells at her when she gets caught in the in her alcove, she has a very Oathbringer like kind of crisis where she like really like shuts down and has like a really similar moment where she's kind of like, what was I even doing? Like what, like, this is the stupidest plan ever, and it was really reminiscent of how she felt right after she realized she'd failed the people of Kholinar. And just some other things that would like, I feel like tend to foreshadow her ability to kind of block off chunks of her memory and whatnot, where I think she says pretty specifically like, when they're talking about her father being dead, she's like, ordinarily Shallan would just not think about that and forget it. But like, she's been forced to confront it because literally like her house is going to fall apart if they don't do something about it. So she's kind of moving, like there's a lot of like signposting that there's a lot of Shallan that we don't know about, and that she's very good at not thinking about things she doesn't want to think about.
Definitely.
I had another Shallan thing. One thing with Shallan that is like really weird in this book and a little bit in Words of Radiance is like the memories that she takes, where she like, she hasn't really done that a whole lot in recent books. But I like this quote where it's describing her taking a memory as snipping free a bud of their soul. She cultivated it and grew it. In terms of like how she takes that memory and draws it. I thought that was a really fascinating, the word cultivated really struck me. I don't know, there's an interesting connection from her magic to cultivation.
There's the resonances. I don't feel like Brandon has really done much, because they're like, Windrunners have strength squires and Lightweavers have like various mnemonic abilities. It's like we get a lot of that in this book, but then we don't really see much of that.
Yeah.
Like it's like,
I think I do wish that that it was like more explicit and like came up more in later books. I think the idea is just that she has these like just kind of this crazy memory, like ability, this like a photographic memory or whatever, and with that's magically enhanced photographic memory, and so now it's just kind of part of she makes use of it.
I think also that there's room for I think it could be mentioned a little more, but I think there's room for it to become more important once we have a fuller understanding of all the surge binding abilities. There's a rationale to let me teach you the 10 powers, and then we will dig into the hybrid combo powers that aren't really powers. Like, it's a harder thing to address than when we haven't even gotten to how dust bringing works, Yeah.
I feel like for the orders we've really delved into, which I guess is mostly just the Windrunners and Lightweavers, not so much like Bondsmiths just have their own deal going on.
They're too complicated to pick apart.
Yeah. And then we see the will shapers, but like Venli is a very non-standard will shaper because she's the first singer will shaper. So it's just like she has her own stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I did notice with the memories too. It's something that I hadn't noticed mentioned, or I think I only mentioned there. But like when Shallan says that when she takes a memory, she does experience like some sort of, there's like a tension until she actually draws it. So it definitely to me is kind of interesting that, so like, you know, something somewhere, some sort of weird cognitive thing I assume is going on, and where she's like loading up a weird type of metal mind with something, not a metal mind literally obviously, but something in that vein.
Cognitive hard drive.
There you go.
Coin the term.
There is just so much foreshadowing for the later books in this book, though. Like the Adolin Sadius duel, like one of his first things is he's like, "Oh, I want to duel that guy. I can't wait to get that guy in the dueling ring." And I'm like, "Man, you really like that's right here." And they're talking about the plateau, like, you know, a large expedition in the very early chapters out into the Shattered Plains.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones that really struck home for me this time was the interlude or the vision of the Radiance giving up their shard plate and shard blades, and just it was a very emotionally different scene this time around, knowing that they had chosen, the Spren had chosen to be sacrificed like that, and just emotionally it hit different.
I definitely agree.
And there's like a bunch of little things like Dawnshards get mentioned in this book, and like we don't know what those are. Like we have no context for that, except that Honor thought they would help against Odium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like the Honor Blades the term Honor Blade get mentioned once in this book that I noticed. It's like they don't even get that name like in the prelude. Probably because Brendan didn't want to confuse people. Like, oh, they're just shard blades. That's all you need to know right now. This book just it forms that bedrock of our understanding that has grown so much. Like we know the 10 forms of surge binding now. At least the names of all 10 forms of surge binding now.
I'm wondering now if there's a world hopper that we missed that I'm like dying to ask Brandon about.
Oh, which one?
Geranid.
You think?
The so I don't know why I've never noticed this, but so Geranid is the female ardent who's like studying the Spren. In their interlude, there's this line. She says that she sighed, standing up, joints popping. Was she getting that old? Starlight. But they'd spent a long time out on this island, and the cursed Starlight just is like really weird. Like we've never seen someone use that term as a curse before, and so just one ways that world hoppers come out a lot is like when they curse in a weird way or say a word that's out of place, and that one just, it could be like they're in the Reshi Isles, it could be like a Reshi curse or something, but we've never seen another Reshi use that.
She also had another line that something about like referring to Roshar specifically. Let me that I picked up on when I was reading through it.
Interesting.
And I don't remember what the line was, but I was like, that's weird that she refers to like Roshar or Shadesmar or something. And
she does use the word Shadesmar.
Which
yeah, she does.
Which I mean,
that's normal.
She could know about it, but the way that she uses it, I think, is a little bit.
Yeah. It's certainly not like common knowledge. Most people are not like walking around talking about Shadesmar and the cognitive realm, I guess.
And Yasna says when she hears the term, she's like, her context as a well-informed person is, oh, the mythical kingdom of the Spren. So like, it's not, but like, it's not a thing that's in scholarship.
But for that, well, that's. Oh, that is that. She does make that comment. That's not Shallan, but for a scholar of Spren, specifically, I feel like it is plausible for Geranid to know that term.
Could be. That's interesting though. I'll have to read that through that again and see what I think. Because Starlight is weird. Like that. Like I'm like trying to think like, okay, there's Shy saying nights at various points, or like I'm trying to think like, is that a Taldane thing? Because I'm always thinking about stars when it comes to Taldane, but that is, that's weird.
Another random one-off curse I noticed that I hadn't really internalized is Axes uses blighted as a curse. It's like, oh, that would be blighted difficult, which we know Amiens are not native to Roshar. So it's like, he is of World Hopper stock at the very least. But I had never really noticed that. Like, oh yeah, like I'm curious to see the point in the Cosmere where that curse comes up again. That might be where the Amiens come from originally.
I could see that. All right. Okay. The other World Hopper that I feel like I'm still like, is this going to become relevant or not? Is that Ardent that talks to Dalinar?
Oh yeah,
Then he uses the word soil. Yeah, and his whole like weird like, we wish you to know of our support for you, High Prince Dalinar. And I'm like, where is this going? Like, and it has never come up again. And I'm always just like, what was that? Like, is it an abandoned plot line? Is it like really laying some early groundwork for something? I just do not know.
And like, what are they? Are they a Ghost Blood too? Like, or are they a member of the 17th Shard? Like, who knows?
Are they with Gera, who we know was a World Hopper in the palace? You know, like clearly they're around, but.
So now that we've had Edgedancer and Dawnshard and encountered the Sleepless, I am now at all points wondering like, who is randomly a Sleepless, and the apothecary that Kaladin interacts with is like described as having like super wrinkly skin. I'm like, is that a disguise for an Amien?
That would be fun. He does do the thing where he acts really old and then he's like totally normal and just like walks around like a regular person. But that's a thing a normal person can do too.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like personality wise, like it doesn't make sense, I think, but like it'd be cool. I'm pretty sure it's a Hordling that Kaladin sees when he's in the slave caravan, because he marks on a legger that like, oh, I've never seen one that color before. And he just thinks like, oh, it's the Stormlands, like stuff is weird here. But I'm like, I think that's a Sleepless watching you, because we know they're watching everybody.
And we know they have a range on them. Like, we don't know what that range is, but we know that their Hordlings can't go too far from like whatever like the main mass of their body is. So that does mean that there is a Sleepless somewhere. Who knows? And that, you know, like it's not just a Sleepless that has a million Kremlings all across the planet and just happens to be watching. There's probably someone within like 1,000 miles of vicinity. If I was just going to guess, I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know, like in terrestrial terms, how far it goes. Like, because it definitely doesn't stretch between planets, but like on a planet, how far?
It could be farther than I think. There's reason to believe there's a Sleepless in the area. That's all I would say. But and they are good at acting like humans. Like, you know, like I think that like Nickley wasn't like a particularly obvious Sleepless, aside from the fact that we knew there had to be one, and he was the guy covered in tattoos. Yeah,
like any old person that is described as being wrinkly, I'm not like, are you a Sleepless in disguise? Oh yeah, it's like the line is like his face was full of chasms. I'm like, those are some particularly deep wrinkles. Oh yeah, like one other thing at the end is like, there's a line about how like the Stormwards think like the high storms are growing stronger. I'm like, I don't think that went anywhere that I recall about high storms getting stronger.
We do know that they like kind of come and go in waves, I think of. So it could have just been like, I don't know, not meant to be anything too deep.
Yeah. But like, it's like, it'll like a long string of like the world is changing, like what's going on. Or like,
and they're pretty keyed into the high storm cycle, you know, like I assume they know that there is a flux to the strength.
Maybe that's how they know that the desolations, like Hoid people know that the desolations are coming, is they've noticed that the high storms are getting stronger.
Stormfather's powering up, getting ready to fight.
Thank you for watching. You can find us at 17thshard.com for all the news, discussion, theories, and fun you could ever want. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can subscribe on YouTube, and you can support us on Patreon. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.